It's so nice to have you back. It's our community and we have wonderful neighbors. Today, Thomas Fox Averill is our guest. He's the writer in residence and professor of English at Washburn University in Topeka. But he is also known as, I'm telling them all, as William Jennings Bryan Oleander. And you can listen to William Jennings Bryan Oleander on KANU.
That's correct.
So you need to know that he is a split personality.
That's right. I have two voices. I have this Tom Averill voice, and I've got this Oleander voice.
So, well, it's a good thing you did that, because you see, if they listen, they'll think I was not telling the truth.
That's
because
right.
It's two different people. And furthermore, he is a Scotsman. And Oliver Goldsmith, I have to tell you, said, "A Scotsman is with disadvantages enough to bring him to humility, but a Scotsman is one of the proudest things alive." That's what Oliver Goldsmith says about you. And he is a proud person. I know he is, because he won an O. Henry Award for Passes at the Moon that he wrote, and received the Kansas Arts Commission Fellowship in Fiction for 2006. And the book that we are going to discuss today, he received the Outstanding Western Novel of 2011, and is called Road. And I told him, I said, you know, I read a lot, and I really liked this book. And I think you will by the time we get through. So let us begin on Road. Robert Johnson is the hero of your novel, and you call him a man who flees from violence only to become what he flees. And so we're going to talk about Robert Johnson and Joe Benson and all of the people that he comes across in his journey, just as we all take journeys. I love the descriptions, and I would love for you to read from your book one of the descriptions that you have written, because it is truly, I guess it's kind of a trite phrase, but the descriptions are the icing on the cake, I think, and they make it so readable and so alive. Would you please be so kind?
I'd be happy to. I researched a lot of places as I was doing the book, so descriptions of places is part of it, and this is when Johnson is getting down into what would later be Texas. No man's land meant it was anyone's land. Crossing it, Johnson named creeks, rises, stands of trees, rock outcroppings, as though his own vernacular might fix these places in his memory and make the return journey more familiar. He turned often, not only to see if he was being followed, but to see what the country he crossed looked like from the other direction. Every tree is different as a different tree from the other side of it, he'd once been told by his grandfather. Johnson supposed the same might be true of people. What sides did Joe Benson have to her? She had seemed shy when a young girl. He'd seen her in town with her mother, trailing in a dress that nearly hid her. But he'd seen her ride past his place with her brothers, not lagging behind, but forcing them to chase her. When Joe's mother died, Robert's mother had taken him in tow to offer the family a loaf of bread, a chicken, a fresh bowl of peas. Joe had appeared behind her father at the door to their cabin. She would not look at him directly, and when her father snarled a thank you and turned, she disappeared as quick as a weed in his mother's garden. No doubt she'll have the most difficult time, his mother said of Joe. I don't think a living soul has ever sung her to sleep. Robert traveled through meadows rich in flowers. A gray-green plant shaped like a candelabra was growing what looked like peas from the top stems that bent with their weight. God, how he wished they were peas. How he wished for something fresh from his mother's garden. How he wished for her voice, singing about oats, peas, beans, and barley, asking, can you or I or anyone know how oats, peas, beans, and barley grow? Can you and I or anyone know?
I believe that it's poetry, truly it is. But I also think that you use that very, very cleverly to define your characters. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right. I try very hard to do with language almost what a song does. and it is not only to give the characters a descriptive sense of their physicality, but also almost a sense of their spirit. And music does that, and since this is a book that's based on music in some ways, I borrowed the plot from Jimmy Driftwood's song, The Tennessee Stud, and then I also worked in other songs like Do You or I or Anyone Know How Oats, Peas, Beans, and Barley Grows, that old English children's song. And there's a bunch of other references to music.
Sing a few lines of the Tennessee Stud so that they know.
Well, it starts out, along about 1825, I left Tennessee very much alive, and I never would have made it through the Arkansas mud if I hadn't been riding on the Tennessee Stud. Had me some trouble with my sweetheart's pa. One of her brothers was a bad outlaw, so I sent her a letter by my Uncle Fudd, and I rode away on the Tennessee Stud. And
that's the name of Robert's horse,
the stud. That's right.
And description is so important, and you use it, yes, to define character, but you use it in other ways too. In Robert's travels, he becomes very hungry, and a little girl ate from a dead bear, and you said, nourished by disruption and death. I mean, that's very powerful, I think. Also, in your characters, you have contrast. Let's take Robert's mother and Joe Benson's mother, the two, the heroine and the hero of this novel. You said Robert's mother went to reward, Joe's to punishment. Explain yourself, sir.
Well, one of the things I ran across when I was researching this book, since it's set in 1825, is that early in the 19th century, there was a big revival in America. There was a sort of a fundamental Christianity revival mentality, and so in a similar way that we're seeing sort of today with this real conservative religion versus, you know, there's always this sense of reward and punishment in that kind of religion. And Robert's father is particularly, as you remember, he's particularly fundamentalist and particularly focused on the afterlife and not the current life. He denies himself even the pleasure of food. And
his father says, life goes on. God took what he wanted. I don't like it any more than you do, period. That was when the child died.
Exactly. Life goes on. Yeah, God takes what he wants. That sense of, you know, this overbearing, almost patriarch who is a certain kind of God. And then Robert's mother comes in after burying the child and says, I don't believe God takes what he wants. I believe he receives what we are able to give him. And it's a whole different way of looking at grief. That's not angry, it's accepting, and it's being able to give something up.
Yeah. And see, those two characters, you pair those characters off, I think, very often in your book. Joe said, as the story begins, Joe says, sometimes a tangled rope needs to be cut. The knots are so tight. And that's where your story begins.
It does.
I think.
Yeah.
I think. Begin the story.
Well, just as the song says, Robert Johnson's a young man who kind of has his future planned out. He's going to raise horses. He has one of the best horses in Tennessee, he thinks. He's building himself a little cabin. He's on 40 acres of disputed land between...
And the key word here is disputed.
Yes, and his family, the Bensons, have disputed that land for a while.
Joe's family.
Joe's family.
Yes.
So that's the trouble that he has with his sweetheart's pa. She sort of seeks him out almost. She's looking for a way to jump from her family to somewhere better. She likes the way he tends to things and takes care of things.
That's what she tells him.
And he is
I like the way you care for things, she says to him.
He is good at that. As a young man, he's very careful. He's very deliberate. And of course, the Bensons end up framing him for a murder he didn't commit, and he has to leave. And so it's almost as though he's wrenched away, against his will, into an adventure, practically a 9-month adventure, where he's not sure of who he is or where he belongs or what he should do next. And it's a journey of self-discovery.
If he can survive it.
Yeah, if he can even survive.
And you know, I think that even though this is a story, and it comes to you through song, many of us have that kind of a trip through life.
Yeah, we're all on that journey.
Yes.
Where we're trying to figure out who are we, what are our strengths, what are our powers, how do we use them to the best effect, and where do we belong?
Well, that's right. And Robert seems to feel that, and maybe it's a rather universal thought, the price of freedom is to flee. And in running, he had lost everything.
Yeah.
Except the horse.
Except the horse, and a certain kind of freedom which isn't really worth much, because he's not really free to do as he wants, which is to settle down, raise horses, be with Joe Benson. And that's what he has to finally realize, I think, as his trip takes him all the way down across the Rio Grande River. And you mentioned earlier that quote that he's a young man who becomes what he's fleeing. Mm-hmm. He does. He has to end up killing a man just as he was accused of killing a man, and that's why he's
different
on
man.
the run.
Different
but
man.
A different man.
Yeah, different man.
But there's that sense that, and one of the people in the novel tells him at one time, whatever it is you're running from, that's what you're going to end up running toward.
That's right. And I had that written down. Mm-hmm. And maybe, you know, he meets a lot of interesting people. And maybe he was doomed, you say, to see himself over and over in what others would do to each other. Mm-hmm. So he meets some interesting people. Let's talk about Hiram and Elizabeth.
Oh, wonderful people.
Good people.
Yeah.
Good people.
Yeah. His
mother, remember, he has no money.
His mother at one
nothing.
point tells him that in the world you basically meet two kinds of people: those who will help you do good, and those who will seek to harm you. And she said, I don't say that to make you paranoid. I just want you to be the kind of person who's always trying to do good. And he meets his share of really good people. And Hiram and Elizabeth are in this fledgling town of Memphis, Tennessee. And Hiram has a racetrack and raises horses, so he has things in common with Robert. But he realizes Robert needs a little more training in how to run a horse. But Hiram's also interested in what's going on the fault line of that Mississippi River, because Tennessee, of course, is a slave state, as the South all is. And then right across the river is open territory.
That's right.
So just like the Missouri River was a sort of fault line between slave Missouri and free Kansas, you have this same fault line along the Mississippi in 1825. And Hiram is involved in helping
escape slaves,
helping people get across the river.
But Hiram has a
freedom.
lovely house, I mean, for that time and
does.
that place. And when Robert meets them, he is pretty nearly on his uppers, as my mother used to say. I mean,
yes.
he is not. He's starving, literally starving to death.
And food is a big part of the novel, because, as you said, he's hungry most of the time, and he dreams of very simple things, you know, pulled pork and beans.
And Joe.
And Joe.
Yes.
But just a good roast chicken. And each time he lands someplace new, it's almost as though he's rescued, isn't it?
Exactly.
When he gets to Hiram, and then when he gets to San Antonio, and then when he finally gets down to Laredo. Mm-hmm. And so there are all these moments where, as you say, he's down as far as you can go, and then he needs to be nourished by good people and by good food.
That's right. And he meets Lucky. Lucky's an interesting character, because Lucky's good and bad.
He is. He's one of these people that's learned how to play both sides. And the Texas of that time is not really Texas. And Mexico is not really Mexico. And New Spain is New Spain. So it's very complicated. The allegiances, do you have allegiance to the world as it's going to be, or the world as it is now? The Spaniards, who are colonists, basically, and the missionaries who have the missions in San Antonio, they own the territory at this point.
Well, and the indigenous Indians.
Then you've got the indigenous Indians, and then you've got
the vaqueros,
the ones that want to own that aren't Spanish, they're more Mexican. So you've got Spanish, Mexican, Native American, and then you've got this guy from the United States, and he's looking around. And Lucky is trying to be that diplomat who can play all sides.
Well, and he's sort of a bridge, it occurs to me, too, because he speaks English.
Right. He's
an opportunist.
He is.
And not terribly honest, only to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And he seems to be the epitome of the bridge among the worlds, really.
That's right. And he has a sort of open sense of morality and truth-telling and all that because of that. But in the long run, he does not do Johnson harm.
Yeah.
You're right. He's a bridge, and he greets him when he comes in, and he lets him go, which he wouldn't have to do.
No, he wouldn't.
Right.
And when he left, he had a horse. He had lost the stud by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he, you know, in that country and in that time, man nor woman nor child nor beast could do without a horse. I mean,
right.
You had to have a horse. And when he left, he was given one of the vaquero horses.
That's right.
And he then, Isabella. And Isabella was an older lady.
That's right, an older horse. But,
yes.
But Robert was good at getting what he could out of a horse. So, and I think that's one of his attributes. He can get what he needs from situations.
And perhaps from him himself as well.
Yes, and he gets smarter and smarter, and he gets more and more resourceful, and he finds that he has more and more inner resources.
And hopefully all of us grow in our journey through life.
And that's why I think toward the end of the book, when he, as the song says, I loped right back across Arkansas, and I whooped her brother, and I whooped her pa. I had a lot of, I mean, I knew that had to happen because it was part of the song, and I was staying true to the song. But the word whoop, even in the Jimmy Driftwood archives in Conway, Arkansas, where I researched a lot of the book, I found it 3 different spellings.
Really?
One is whipped, like whipping someone, which seems violent. One of them's whooped, W-H-U-P-P, like a whooped, like, you know, kind of brute force again. And then one of them is whooped, W-H-O-O-P.
As a noise?
Whoop, like we whoop. But its original meaning is to call someone out. So like when you do a war whoop, you're calling out to your enemy. And so I decided that Johnson might use his head and whoop instead of
no condition to use his fist, that's for sure.
Whoop and whip. And in that sense, he learns that his logic, his brain, and his emotions, as he can trust them, are more of a resource than just brute force.
But he had to meet one more person before his apotheosis or his metamorphosis, whatever you want to call it, began, and that was the Bonney family.
Yes.
Talk about them a little bit, because they are truly the best of the good.
They're wonderful people. They're actually based on real character. Joseph Bonney, as he would be called in French, was the son of a French fur trader and a Quapaw woman. And that the French had come in, I think I say in the book, the Spanish have a story of blood and gold.
Exactly.
And the French have a story of women and children.
And family.
And they did intermarry with Native Americans very freely. So Joseph Bonney, who did start Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and who did negotiate a lot of the treaties between the Indians and the United States that opened up Arkansas as a territory, is an actual historical figure. And he did have an inn, and I modeled his inn after a living history farm from 1843 that I saw when I was researching the book. It was a wonderful place because it was literally living history. There was a berm that you had to pass through to go into, and when you went through the berm, you were in 1843. Everyone was dressed that way, they spoke that way, they didn't talk about anything that was current events. They were working the farm, they were milking the cows, they were cooking every day. And then, of course, they went home to their television sets. But I got a real good sense of what that life might have been like. And so I used that place as a model, and then I used Joseph Bonney as the model, too, who's trying to build a place for good people to come and live. For good people.
Then I think that's the operative phrase, for good people to come. And he then, he provides the pivot, I think, for Robert Johnson. And he says, this is Arkansas, this is a new life for you. This is you can raise your horses, you can, look what we have to offer. And Robert, by this time, has made some money racing his horses. And what I found kind of interesting was he trusts Joseph. And he says, I'm going to leave my money with you, but I'll be back to get it when I go back to get Joe, because he knew that in order to be truly free, he had to quit running away from his past and running away from his future as well.
That's right.
And you make that note in the book. He was running from his past as well as his future.
Yeah, and also when he's in Arkansas, he says he still has his eye on home, but he feels home in Arkansas too. You know,
he does.
He knows that's where he's going to have to go.
Start a new
and
life.
Start a fresh life.
Yes.
And that's such an American story. That's what attracted me to the song, is that it's a story of courtship. It's a story of kind of a fugitive learning who he is. It's a story of like the typical showdown.
Yeah.
It's also a story of settlement. And at the end, there's the song is a pretty little baby on the cabin floor, little horse colt running around the door. I love the girl with the golden hair, and the Tennessee stud loves the Tennessee mare. And it's sort of that sense of everything coming together and the next generation coming out of it.
But I also feel that vining through your book are biblical references too. Am I incorrect about that? I mean, he wanders around, you know, like Moses in the desert almost.
And he has his time in the desert, like every visionary does, and that's when the Tennessee stud's green eyes turn blue, which is a line in the song, because it's so arid and so hot and so dry and so nothing but blue sky.
But
and
we all face
it
arid,
is a spiritual,
hot and dry
it is a
sometimes.
spiritual journey.
Yes, it is.
And he moves into a Catholic world, which he's never seen before, both the French and the Spanish.
Yes.
And when he meets the priest, they have a discussion about doubting Thomas, and whether
which is really a line we should bring up, because doubting Thomas will in just a minute we're going to talk about doubting Thomas again.
Good.
So, but yes, the priest brings that up.
It is that spiritual journey, and some people have also noticed little touches of the Odyssey in it, or the typical journey story, A Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes. I was going to say that. Yes.
Yeah, an Odyssey.
Because,
that, you know, when you're a writer, you kind of look to those models.
Yeah.
You've got a man and his horse, and a lot of time.
So you got to fill it up somehow.
So well, who's he going to encounter?
Yeah.
What's he going to learn? How's he going to learn it as he moves?
Well, and you say that the phases, and he does go through phases, that the phases as he goes through identify the distant prospects of his life.
Mm-hmm.
So you might explain yourself there.
Well, there are these phrases that we always think of, in the long run, or after all, or and you think of getting to that place where you are, finally you've made the long run.
That's
and
right.
it finally is after all. After all this has happened, what are you going to have? And when he's by himself and he's contemplating that future that he's running away from, at the same time there's all these ironies. It's like he's running from the past, but he's living in the future.
Well, and he has gotten the stud back.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides, after Arkansas becomes the goal,
Mm-hmm.
you describe him, because he said, I have to go back. I have to make it right with the Bensons. I have to get Joe, and I will be back. And you describe him seated tall on the stud. And he said, I am not the man who doubted. I'm going back to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. That's that doubting Thomas again.
That's right. See,
and
that's right.
What the priest points out to him is, because I was rereading my scripture at that time when I was writing that scene, because the priest, of course, knows all the scripture. Robert doesn't know much. He can't read.
He can't write either.
He's illiterate.
Yes.
And his father can read, just barely read the scripture. And he's never paid attention to enough to the doubting Thomas thing to know that Thomas did doubt, but also Thomas is the one that suggested they all go together to Gethsemane. And so he was a very courageous man. And can you be both doubtful and courageous? I think you can.
I think you can.
I think that's the real message in that story, is that we all have courage is doing something when you have doubts.
That's right.
Not when you have confidence.
That's right, exactly.
So that's true courage.
Absolutely. And he then is riding toward his future instead of riding away from it. And you have so many metaphors in this book. As he is going home toward Tennessee and they cross the river, I mean, it's a bit, you know, it's a full dunking.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, his other house, the Bensons, burned. He had built a house.
Right.
And his father had given him the saddle horn from an old saddle, which he had made a door handle out of, which he had kept because he was going to use it again. He was bringing with him his past. When he got that full dunking in the river, he threw away that saddle horn.
That's right.
And that, to me, was the apotheosis. I mean, he then had cleansed himself. He had opened himself up toward a new life. That saddle horn was the last vestige of the old life that he had thrown away. And he also had made peace with the Bensons. He gave them the land. He said.
And he made a kind of peace with his father as well. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the water, and some of those are kind of, he takes, I think, 3 baths. He takes, he has to cross each river 3 times, which is interesting because as he goes down and then as he comes back, but then he's going back to Arkansas.
That's right.
So
That's right.
The sort of triple.
Exactly.
We love 3 wishes. We love 3 brothers. We love, you know.
Yes.
The 3 is sort of magical number in Western writing anyway.
Well, it certainly was magical in this writing because I thought it was wonderful. And you say the important part is the end, the part yet to be lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that realization comes in on him too. Real quickly, sing the last lines of the Tennessee stud about you sang it just once before.
Oh yeah, a pretty little baby on the cabin floor, and a little horse colt running round the door, and I love that girl with the golden hair, and the Tennessee stud loves a Tennessee mare.
And
Doc Watson used to say, they're good horses.
They're good horses. And there it is, road. And you have met Robert Fox Averill. He's a writer, a teacher, a bagpiper, a Scotsman, a haggis maker, and truly a man for all seasons. Do read the book. And Robert Burns says, "O Scotia, my dear native soil, for whom my warmest wish to heaven is sent. Long may the hardy sons of rustic toil be blessed with health and peace and sweet content." And you as well, Robert Averill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Read Road. It's a wonderful book. You can get it on Amazon.
Thank you.